The Amazing Digital Circus is a wonderful show, blends wacky adventures and emotional moments in a balanced way, and its approach to focusing on the personal struggles of its characters allows the viewers to feel a deeper connection to the cast. One of my favorite things in the digital circus is how it's able to both contain the chaos of the plot and give its characters a space to breathe and express their emotions without the need to follow it with a joke or sarcastic commentary, which many other popular adult shows struggle with. In short, the Amazing Digital Circus keeps it real without sacrificing the entertainment part. As a result, we get to see the relationships between the cast progressing naturally, and the bonds formed between them feel quote-unquote real, which is quite ironic seeing that they are trapped in a digital space. Warning: this review contains spoilers for the 6th episode. Be prepared. I want to talk about my favorite duo of the show, Pomni and Jax, and their forming friendship. I believe that out of all of the cast, Jax and Pomni at the moment have the most interesting dynamic out of all the characters in the circus. It's a result of both of them having strong personalities that, when combined, quickly overpower the rest of the cast. They bring a lot in each other, and watching their relationship unfold has been fascinating. In today's video, I will analyze Jax's and Pomni's dynamic and explain what their confrontation at the end of episode 6 really means. The first couple of episodes took their time introducing us to the characters and establishing the existing relationship dynamics. Much like Pomni, we, the audience, grew from confused and mildly alarmed by the circus to accustomed to its ways. We were strangers to this world and its characters. But by episode 6, both Pomni and the viewers have settled in. Starting as early as episode 3, Pomni begins forming bonds with the other members of the circus. Not every bond is equally deep. It's evident that Pomni haven't talked to Zubul much and only ever meaningfully interacted with Gangle when the ribbon was cracking under pressure at the end of the 3rd episode. As for Regatha and Kinga, it's much better. While Pomni, in my opinion, still regards Regatha as just the good acquaintance, they are slowly but steady opening to having an honest conversation. Kinga and Pomni had a whole episode dedicated to them, and it's clear that Pomni deeply appreciated his help and care in his rare moments of sanity. Surprisingly to many, the show took a lot of time establishing and growing Pomni's relationship with Jax, the resident wildcard who deliberately goes out of his way to cause as much chaos as possible. I've talked about it in my Jax analysis video in detail, how Jax and Pomni grew closer in episode 5. Pomni even mentioned it herself. He was the one who reached out to her, not the other way around. Most probably, it wasn't planned on Jax's part, but it happened. With episode 6, Pomni reaches to Jax herself, assuming from their previous experience together that he doesn't mind her company. Now, let me ask you this. Why would Jax reach out to Pomni in the first place? I've seen some people assume that it was all a master plan to manipulate Pomni and make her as chaotic as he is, or that it was a revenge to Regatha. Honestly though, I don't believe that this is the case. Jax is not some genius manipulator who plans his every move in advance. Jax tries hard to seem cool and nonchalant, but he's a mess and is afraid people will find out. With Pomni, it just happened. People can't go long interacting with each other on a daily basis without forming at least some sort of an opinion about each other. As a new person, she naturally draws interest from the others, especially considering they don't have other options with interacting with other humans. Jax's situation is an interesting one. Unlike Regatha, who has made it painfully obvious she wants people to like her and be friends with everyone, Jax tries to create an illusion that he doesn't really need people, that he's essentially too cool to care. Well, his plan fails miserably when it comes to Pomni, largely because she is new at the circus and doesn't have any preformed opinions on the cast. She is more open to Jax than anyone else. Jax is isolated from everyone in the circus, partly due to his own decisions and partly due to his personality. Pomni is the one who doesn't know about his past and the actions he might have caused, such as the abstraction or disappearance of his friend Ribbit, the green frog, whose fate is still unknown. Pomni is easier to approach than the others, and I argue it's easier to try to be emotionally open with her, which is what Jax tried to do in the 5th episode during the talk under the stars, something Jax hasn't done with anyone else in this circus before, at least to our knowledge. On top of that, Jax and Pomni have compatible personalities, with Pomni being emotionally intelligent and strong enough not to bend under Jax's dominating presence. Everyone else in this circus, except for maybe Zubul, isn't capable of standing up to him, so Pomni provides a challenge that other characters do not, which is also something Jax appreciates in her. That is also one of the reasons Jax was so eager to share his philosophy of the world with Pomni and encourage her to embrace the chaos in this scene where they were shooting metal cans in episode 6. At first, Pomni appears to be weak and emotionally unstable, but that is only because she was still trying to find her place in this bizarre world she was trapped in. Some people like to judge Pomni for being too weak in the first episodes, but I disagree. I think many of us would have reacted the same, if not even worse than she did. And I doubt everyone else in the cast accepted their fate easily. In recent episodes, we got to see the other side of Pomni, particularly her being emotionally intelligent, compassionate, and being able to stand up for herself, all of which are undoubtedly attractive traits, with many of Jax's relationship already being in a bad state, such as Zubul being openly hostile to him, Gangle being afraid of him, and Regatha not being able to express herself freely and hiding behind her facade of toxic positivity. Pomni becomes a very nice person who is able to respond to Jax's feelings and provide a reaction. By the way, Pomni pushing back happened as early as episode 2, where she cursed Jax for pushing her out of the moving track. So it's not like this is new. It just took time for Pomni to be able to express that to him to the fullest. The problem comes in the fact that Jax doesn't consciously want to form any relationships. He tries his best to avoid getting attached to anybody precisely because he is afraid of forming an emotional connection with them. I think I've mentioned this in my previous analysis of Jax, that he is divided between his subconscious and conscious mind. Unconsciously, he wants to be closer to somebody, but consciously he tries to avoid it. And unfortunately, Pomni is at the center of his inner turmoil, whether she likes it or not. Luckily for us, Pomni is mature enough to understand Jax's antics and react to them properly, not allowing herself to be exploited. Jax is one of my favorite characters because he is complex and interesting to observe. Unlike many circus members, he avoids opening up and admitting his fears. Other characters have someone to talk to. Gangle has Zubul, Regatha talks to Kinga, and Pomni has Kinga and many others. Jax, by contrast, has nobody, due to his chosen indifference and emotional detachment as his coping mechanism. While others seek connection and support, Jax hides his insecurities behind a facade, posing as an antagonist with his Bugs Bunny-like persona. We can see at the end of episode 6 that this strategy in the long run isn't doing him any good. His self-isolation only leads him to being emotionally exposed to his anxieties and not having any support mechanism or people he can seek help from. Like many of you, I also thought that something bad was going to happen to Regatha, but this episode shows that, despite having trouble connecting to others, Regatha has a huge advantage over Jax, and that is that she's able to openly admit her problems and communicate her feelings clearly to those who are willing to listen, such as Kinga. Jax, on the other hand, does not have this ability, and I think that if he does not change the path he's walking on right now, something truly horrible might happen to him. Or, even if something doesn't happen to him directly, his fears might cause him to do something terrible to others. We can already see that he has a strong influence over Gangle and has already made her feel less than a human being, which is a very dangerous effect one can have on other people. Part of me fears that he might actually cause someone else to abstract, with his harsh words and him understanding the insecurities of others. Jax is observant and he knows which buttons to push. But let's go back to Jax and Pomni. True, I believe that he didn't intend to grow closer to her, but it happened, even if Jax saw the interactions just as part of his game before the end of episode 6. Still, he wanted to share parts of his worldview with Pomni. That is why he insisted of her not being so considerate of others and treating this world as he does, as a game. Jax's philosophy is that if he reduces himself to less of a human being and becomes more of a character, the funny one as he himself says, it is easier to bear the nightmare of their everyday existence. Basically, Jax thinks that if you don't acknowledge your conflicting emotions, it is easier to think of yourself as just one trait, one gimmick that you can stick to. Maybe Jax truly wanted to help Pomni with this idea, seeing as they are indeed similar in a lot of aspects, such as their sense of humor and their ability to embrace the chaos and harm others for their own benefit, as we saw in the gun game. Of course, I don't think that Pomni would react the same if it weren't a digital world where consequences are virtually non-existent. Still, Pomni isn't Jax. As we can perfectly see at the end of the episode, she is capable of expressing her own self without Jax's control, which takes him aback and forces him to face the shortcomings of his own ways. And eventually, Pomni causes his crash out, first during their confrontation and later at the award show in the bathroom. After having a great time with Pomni, shooting all of their friends, Jax is left alone with her. As they are the winners of the game, Pomni is seemingly happy with everything that happens. She hugs Jax in the spur of a moment, which tells us that she is genuinely happy to have spent time with him. Unfortunately for all of us, this sweet and playful episode is going to end in tragedy, which I am going to analyze in detail right now. Jax's and Pomni's confrontation perfectly encapsulates their character dynamic and who they are as people inside and perhaps maybe even outside the circus. So, right after they shoot Zubul, Pomni is seen being happy and hugging Jax. Jax, in his rare moment of reacting sincerely, pushes her away, being afraid of intimacy. Then he goes back to his persona and comments on how the competition wasn't anything serious, implying that they are superior to the others and indirectly praising Pomni's skills. Pomni is still in a playful mood. She upholds her chaotic evil persona and goes for the classic trope of one villain betraying the other. But Jax is essentially pulled out of this performance because of the hug. He wants to remove himself from this situation and asks Pomni to shoot him. Pomni senses that something is wrong and, seeing as the game is over, proposes that they should be winners together. However, it would mean accepting that they worked as a team and bonded in the process, which Jax absolutely cannot have. He again insists on Pomni shooting him, doubling down and denying they were a team at all. When Pomni openly admits she doesn't want to shoot him, Jax uses a very basic tactic that a lot of middle schoolers actually use and says that he thought Pomni was cool, essentially trying to make her want to impress him and do what he tells her to do. Pomni, of course, has none of it. She has already bonded with Jax and she wants to establish that. She wants to dig deeper than this surface connection and she wants to understand what is happening at the moment. Pomni tells Jax that they were bonding, to which Jax responds with denial, sliding back into his philosophy of everything being a game and everything being for his own entertainment. He then demands to be shot, which translates into him asking to be removed from the room and the conversation. What I love is that Pomni buys none of that and asks him if she did something wrong, sensing that there was a shift in Jax's behavior after she hugged him. The next part of Pomni's speech is not about them being a team anymore. It's about them forming a connection. But before she can go any further with that, Jax interrupts her and insists on continuing the game, sliding into something he's more comfortable with. He wants them to become their characters again, This time though, when Jax comes closer to Pomni and they are face to face, notice how her hand holding the gun shakes. That's because this conversation is no longer part of the play and Pomni takes it seriously. She doesn't want Jax to revert back to just being a jerk that everybody hates. She asks him if she does what he wants and shoots him, will he just pretend that nothing happened? Jax, still trying to be his character, says that they were never friends in the first place. Which of course is a lie that he tells not just to Pomni but to himself. Pomni is having none of it, and again, she insists that what they had between them was real, that they had a genuine connection. Pomni states that she's not going to fall under Jax's tactic and not going to let it slide, to which Jax responds by trying to stay in character and making everything into a joke of Pomni being into him. I do ship Funny Bunny, by the way, so not cool, Jax. What I find fascinating is that when Pomni asks Jax if he can take anything seriously, he responds by stating that she's a cartoon clown and he cannot take her seriously in any way, just as he cannot take himself seriously, which echoes his previous words about the circus not being real and them needing to embrace the chaos of the situation and treat it like a game. He is the funny one and Pomni is a cartoon clown, so obviously they cannot express real concerns or emotions. They are characters who go through various adventures, cause cartoon chaos and hurt each other. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because there are no consequences here apart from the emotional ones, of course, but that's something that Jax is not ready to face himself. Then they go back and forth with Pomni trying to get Jax to admit that he is afraid of showing emotions and Jax essentially making everything into a joke until she talks about abstraction, which obviously snaps something inside Jax and he becomes angry and sincere, mentioning how everybody blames him for someone's abstraction, which again might be his friend Ribbit's abstraction or not, we don't yet know. But it's obvious that Jax thinks a lot about it, that it's on his mind, and Pomni has enough emotional intelligence to apologize. After his initial outburst, Jax makes it painfully clear that just words will not be able to make him admit anything. He asks Pomni to shoot him. Pomni then, in a desperate attempt to get a reaction out of him, asks Jax how he would react if she abstracted, to which Jax lied, very obviously by the way, that he would move on. I am sure that some of the characters would fall under his persona and think that he told the truth and he doesn't care about anyone. But Pomni has seen enough of him by that time and she doesn't buy into it. What happens next is one of my absolute favorite interactions in all of the series. Basically, Jax immediately regrets his harsh words, and I think he recognizes that it was too far even for him. In his own fashion, while trying to stay in character, he apologized, telling that it was a joke, indirectly admitting that he doesn't think that he would just move on if Pomni abstracted. Pomni does a very fascinating thing. Initially, when I watched this scene, I thought that Pomni would either shoot herself or give in and shoot Jax, saying something like, if you want to be by yourself, fine, you can be by yourself. But she does something much more interesting. She uses an intimate form of violence, fighting Jax with her own bare hands. And that is, while not the best reaction, is better than using the gun, because the gun would mean that Pomni gave in and followed what Jax wanted. Shooting him or shooting herself would just result into them finishing this conversation without achieving anything. Either way, one of them would be physically removed from the room. But Pomni does not want it to end until the things between them are resolved. She wants to use physical force to make Jax admit that he's lying. After the physical confrontation, Jax is pushed against the wall. His continuous attempts to remove Pomni and end the discussion have failed, so he is forced to react. And he does because of his anger. I very much like his phrase about a chicken fetus in an egg, because this is how a lot of his fans see him, as a tragic, misunderstood baby boy who just needs love and support to come out of his shell and connect to others. But it's not entirely true, or maybe even not true at all. Jax is an adult man who has a lot of trauma and is faced with horrible conditions, but ultimately his way of coping with said conditions causes active harm to others, and he is the one who is in charge of his behavior. He chooses to be horrible to the other circus members. He chooses to cause violence, and he is self-aware enough to know that. Jax has an outburst one last time, basically begging Pomni to accept his personality that he created, of the antagonist, of the evil one who just likes making others suffer for his own entertainment. But it's already too late, and I think that he understands that Pomni can already see right through him. He immediately regrets his words and curses, then begs Pomni to let him be, not to try to make him be sincere. I think Pomni might have realized that this is what prevents Jax from snapping, this persona he created for himself. And he is terrified of admitting that he is a real human being behind this facade. Pomni's lack of response speaks louder than any words, and the way she just sits there looking at Jax all concerned, not angry. She understands that there is pain, but she cannot help him right now. Contrary to what many fans might believe, I do not think that this is the end of Jax's and Pomni's friendship. Pomni is a very intelligent woman who has a deep understanding of the emotions of others, and she sees right through Jax. She understands that he is not just the evil joke who doesn't care for others, and there is more to him, but he is too traumatized to admit it right now. I don't think Pomni has given up on him, but she also will not force him to change if he's not ready to do so. She can give Jax all of her support, but if he is not ready to do it himself, there is ultimately nothing she can do. Still, as King has said, giving someone space should never be the same as giving up on them. And with that, I'm ending today's video. What do you think of Jax's and Pomni's relationship, and what do you think will happen to them in the future? Personally, I'm very eager to find out, but also a little bit afraid of what comes next. Thank you so much for staying up until the end. I would be so grateful if you could subscribe. Your support means everything to me. Well, I'll see you in the next video, and bye bye!